YuMenglong's manager caught abusing and torturing him. The dark truth finally unmasked the revelation that has just exploded across every corner of the internet, has shattered the last remaining illusions surrounding YuMenglong's tragic story. For months, the public believed they had seen everything: the leaked videos, the secret child, the betrayals from so-called friends, the haunting footage of his final days, and the funeral in Urumqi that left the entire nation in tears. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared the world for the truth that has now surfaced about the man who stood closest to him, his manager. The one person who should have protected him. The one person he trusted with his career, his schedule, his health, his safety, and his life. The one who, according to new explosive evidence, may have been his silent tormentor behind closed doors. The story began to unravel when a whistleblower, someone who once worked within the same agency, stepped forward with details too horrifying to ignore. At first, people refused to believe it. Fans cried. Reporters doubted it. Even critics hesitated. But as private recordings, time-stamped logs, and eyewitness testimonies began to surface, the truth took shape like a monster stepping out of the dark. And what emerged was a tale of systematic cruelty so shocking, so cold, so meticulously hidden that even those who had doubted the earlier scandals fell silent in disbelief. One of the earliest scenes described by insiders takes place in a rehearsal room, late at night, long after the building had emptied. YuMenglong had been rehearsing for a new performance while exhausted, barely able to stand. Witnesses said his manager entered the room with the calmness of a man walking into a cafe, carrying a clipboard, a bottle of water, and an expression that never changed. Instead of telling him to rest, instead of noticing the tremor in his hands, the manager allegedly barked orders at him, forcing him to redo scenes, retake notes, and repeat movements until his legs shook violently. At one point, Menglong reportedly fell, hitting the floor hard enough to echo through the hallway. But instead of rushing to help him, the manager walked around him, standing over him like a shadow, whispering something so chilling that the whistleblower refuses to repeat it publicly. They only said, "It wasn't human." Another scene, even more disturbing, allegedly took place in a private van after a long event. Fans had noted that Menglong looked unusually pale that night, hiding his hands in his sleeves, biting his lip every time a camera flashed. What no one saw was the moment after the door closed and the tinted windows hid everything. According to a source who was inside the vehicle, the manager unleashed a quiet, controlled fury, scolding him for ruining the schedule, for looking weak, for making the team lose face. The van shook during the shouting, and at one point, the manager allegedly grabbed Menglong's wrist so tightly that he left marks that makeup artists had to cover the next day. The source said Menglong simply stared at the floor, expressionless, as if he had learned long ago that resistance only made things worse. They said the silence in that van was heavier than any scream. The abuse, according to those coming forward, wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was frighteningly silent. At photo shoots, people recall the manager standing behind him, expression cold, eyes unblinking, observing every movement. If Menglong smiled too softly, too brightly, or too wearily, the manager's fingers would subtly tighten on his shoulder, a reminder, a warning, a threat. Those who worked with them often wondered why Menglong sometimes appeared to flinch when someone approached him from behind, or why he kept checking the room as if expecting something or someone. Now the answer is painfully clear. But the most horrifying details come from leaked footage that allegedly shows explicit moments of psychological and physical torment. It was reportedly recorded by a hidden camera that someone in the staff placed deliberately, fearing that something terrible was happening behind the closed doors of the agency's disciplinary room, a place ironically meant for private performance coaching. In the leaked footage, there is a moment where YuMenglong is sitting on a chair, shoulders slumped, breathing unevenly, while the manager stands inches from his face, speaking slowly, coldly, in a voice devoid of emotion. His words are not fully audible, but the tone alone is enough to freeze the blood of anyone who has watched it. At one point, The manager slams a folder onto the table beside him, causing Menglong to flinch so violently that the chair legs scrape the floor. That sound, that scrape, has now become symbolic, a reminder of the silent suffering he endured. Even more disturbing is the footage showing the manager allegedly forcing him to continue working despite clear signs of physical pain. In one clip, Menglong appears to clutch his ribs, wincing. Instead of allowing him to rest, the manager allegedly drags him to his feet, shoves a script into his hands, and demands he rehearse lines he physically cannot get through. His voice cracks. His breath falters. He tries. He fails. The manager looks at him with the calm cruelty of someone who thinks they are molding clay rather than breaking a human being. And the camera captures everything: the trembling hands, the swallowing of tears, the half-whispered apologies from Menglong as if he believed the pain was his fault. Another insider recounts a particularly unforgettable scene backstage during a concert tour. Menglong had fainted in the dressing room from exhaustion, collapsing just minutes before he was meant to perform. When staff scrambled to call a doctor, the manager allegedly stopped them, saying, "He will perform. He always performs." The insider claims the manager revived him with cold water, forcing him upright, slapping his face lightly to wake him, not out of concern but out of twisted necessity. And when Menglong finally stepped on stage that night, smiling, glowing under the lights, the audience cheered, never realizing he had been trembling, barely conscious, moments before. There are dozens of scenes like these emerging, each more devastating than the last, each painting a picture of a young man who lived under constant fear, constant pressure, constant manipulation. And worst of all, he was isolated in his suffering. His friends betrayed him. His associates deceived him. But the manager, the one who was supposed to shepherd his career, guard his well-being, and protect him from harm, was allegedly the one inflicting the deepest wounds. One heartbreaking testimony revealed a moment near the end of his life where Menglong reportedly tried to break away from the manager, telling someone privately that he couldn't breathe anymore. Those words now echo like a prophecy, a warning, a cry for help that went unheard until it was too late. Fans who had once defended the manager with passion now feel sickened. Many are deleting old comments, apologizing publicly, and expressing guilt for not seeing the signs. Some say the manager's silence during the scandals, his sudden disappearances, his trembling at the funeral now make horrifying sense. When Menglong's coffin was lowered in Urumqi, the manager had collapsed in tears, shaking uncontrollably. At the time, people thought it was grief. Now they wonder if it was guilt. The exposure of the manager's alleged torture has turned the entire country into a storm of outrage. Protests have begun forming outside the agency building. Fans worldwide are demanding justice. Law firms are stepping forward. Psychologists are analyzing the footage and confirming patterns of long-term abuse. And somewhere, buried under trophies, headlines, and years of silence, lies the memory of a boy who wanted to sing for quiet people and suffered in ways the world never imagined. The revelations from Part 1 were already disturbing, but the continuation of the truth surrounding YuMenglong's manager paints an even darker picture, exposing a level of cruelty so severe that fans are now questioning how such horrors could have been hidden for so many years. As more insiders gather the courage to speak, scenes once whispered about in secret corridors are now exploding into the public eye, showing a pattern of abuse that grew more intense the more successful Menglong became. Every new testimony adds another layer of dread, and each layer reveals how deeply the manager's power was rooted in fear, control, and a twisted sense of ownership over Menglong's life. One insider who once worked as an assistant described a moment so chilling that it has already gone viral. It happened during the filming of one of Menglong's biggest dramas. The schedule was brutal, but the manager made it unbearable. On a day when temperatures were freezing and the cast was struggling to stay warm, Menglong's hands were shaking so badly that he could barely hold his script. Instead of letting him rest, the manager forced him to rehearse outside, away from the heaters, claiming that the cold would keep him alert. The assistant said that at one point, Menglong's fingers stiffened completely, turning pale from the cold, and he dropped the script. The manager didn't even flinch. He simply bent down, picked it up, and shoved it back into Menglong's hands, staring at him with an expression that made the assistant's skin crawl. They said the manager spoke in a tone that wasn't loud, but sharp enough to cut through the air like a blade. And Menglong, shivering uncontrollably, whispered, "I'm sorry," as if his body failing him was a personal offense. Another staff member recalled a rehearsal for a commercial shoot that was supposed to last 1 hour but ended up taking 6 because Menglong kept collapsing from exhaustion. Each time he fell, the manager would order everyone to give him a minute, instead of stopping the shoot entirely. Witnesses said that Menglong repeatedly tried to stand back up even when he could barely breathe, terrified of what the manager would say if he didn't. One witness described a moment where Menglong's vision blurred so badly that he accidentally walked into a prop, hitting his forehead. Blood dripped down his face, but the manager simply handed him a tissue and told him to finish the take first. The makeup artist later revealed that Menglong apologized to her for causing trouble because she needed to reapply his foundation. That apology, fans say, is the most heartbreaking part, proof of how deeply broken he had become under the weight of obedience. A former driver delivered one of the most disturbing accounts yet. He revealed that the manager often forced Menglong into midnight training sessions during long drives between cities. These sessions involved repeating lines, studying scripts, and answering rapid-fire questions about upcoming schedules. If Menglong hesitated, even for a moment, the manager would tap his shoulder repeatedly, harder each time, until Menglong corrected himself. The driver said the most terrifying moment happened on a night when Menglong's voice was barely audible from exhaustion. After hours of non-stop training, he finally whispered, "Can we stop? I feel dizzy." Instead of stopping, the manager rolled the window down, letting freezing air flood the car, and told him to wake up because artists don't get tired. The driver said Menglong pressed his hand against the cold air, eyes glassy, as if trying to stay conscious. That image has now spread across fan pages. A superstar fighting to stay awake in the dark, cold night, trapped beside the man controlling his life. A producer who once disagreed with the manager shared an incident that explains why no one dared to intervene. The producer had suggested giving Menglong a week off to recover from a fever. Before the meeting even ended, the manager confronted them in private, slamming his hand against the wall and saying, "He doesn't need rest. He needs discipline." The producer said that moment felt like staring into the eyes of someone who believed Menglong wasn't a person but a tool. They backed off immediately, and the schedule continued, without change. The fever worsened. Menglong performed anyway. The manager claimed it proved his commitment. Even more horrifying are the private recordings being described by insiders who have seen them but refuse to release them publicly due to the graphic emotional impact. In one audio clip, Menglong can be heard crying so softly it barely sounds like a human voice. The manager is allegedly telling him that the world will abandon him if he ever disobeys, that his career exists only because the manager built it, that he owes everything to him. Those who heard the recording said the most painful part wasn't the manager's words, it was Menglong's silence. His quiet sniffles. His attempt to breathe through tears without making noise. Like someone who had learned that even crying was dangerous. A stylist added another piece to the puzzle, describing how the manager would often inspect Menglong's outfits not for fashion, but for composure. If Menglong looked too relaxed, the manager would tighten belts, adjust collars, or pull back his hair harshly until it caused pain. During one award show, the stylist claimed the manager yanked Menglong's jaw upward so sharply that it left a faint bruise near his ear. Fans later noticed that bruise but assumed it came from filming. Now, the truth is far more sinister. Perhaps the most heartbreaking scene comes from someone who worked in the building late at night. They recalled hearing faint sounds from the agency's private room, a soft thud, a muffled whimper, footsteps pacing. When they lingered, the manager stepped out moments later, calm as ever, adjusting his cuffs like nothing had happened. But the witness said the look on Menglong's face when he finally exited the room 20 minutes later was something they will never forget. His eyes were red. His posture was stiff. And there was a tremor in his hands that spoke louder than any words could. All of these testimonies now converge into one horrifying truth. YuMenglong was trapped in a world where his pain was invisible, his suffering was routine, and his silence was forced. Fans are now realizing that the radiant smile he always wore may not have been joy at all. It may have been survival.